a better idea if there was any damage to the vehicle that might be slowing down the driver.
If we can close in. Yeah, and that was one of the things as this thing seems to start trying to wind down to a close. It looks like she's running into traffic right now, trying to squeeze in between. Look at this right here, pushing her way through.
Absolutely. Now, does that ramp it up for police? Are police going to look at this more seriously? I mean, they already are, because this is an attempted murder suspect, and now we've seen this aggressive action.
Yes, definitely, and it looks like it's hard to tell whether or not she's got, okay, out of the vehicle, on foot. This is going to be a foot pursuit right now. Up. Oh, climbing into another vehicle.
Oh, my goodness.
Someone actually picked her up. She ran out of her vehicle, bailed out, and bailed into this vehicle right now. And this looks to be maybe like a Ford, SUV. And now this individual going, looks like west on Century at about 65 miles per hour, westbound on Century.
All right, so the disabled vehicle left behind now in this new vehicle that has taken off, and the police were out of their cars at that point. We saw them thinking this was coming to an end. It was not. She jumped out, climbed into that car, and is on the go once again. We have our maps up now so you can see exactly where. And slowing down right now as, Roland, you try to zoom in past these buildings here and get an eyes on this vehicle. This is just crazy that this is continuing in this way. We are watching as authorities continue to pursue this person. If you're just joining us, once again, we're watching this pursuit that started just after the noon hour, has been in Westchester, Inglewood. It's LAPD that we're in pursuit. We're over by the airport. We've been going round and round with this, really pretty much staying in this area. But now this crazy situation where that vehicle that appeared to be disabled came to a stop, and we thought for a moment all of this might be over as police moved in, but no, jumped in another car, and they are off and rolling. Police are in hot pursuit.
Yeah, hot pursuit now, making a left-hand turn onto, I believe that's going to be Grevillea. I initially said westbound on Century. She was actually eastbound on Century, so coming away from LAX, perhaps going into an area that she's more familiar with, but there was a left-hand turn on to Grevillea from Century, and right now in excess of about 40 miles per hour, making a right-hand turn now, making a right-hand turn onto Hardy Street.
And Roland, one thing I left out of the recap was how many cars that she managed to break through to get out of that traffic stop right there, and several cars had to be damaged in that mess.
Okay. Yeah, using that SUV in any way she possibly could to force her way through all that traffic, just muscling her way through, using the weight of that. And as this patrol vehicle pulls up, it looks like they're going to try a pit maneuver perhaps. And from all indications, it looks like they want to get this thing over with and end this thing. In traffic right now, we're at La Brea and Arbor Vitae.
What are the dangers of doing a pit maneuver at these speeds? I mean, I know they've been close, but the speeds seem just a little bit much for a pit maneuver. To do it safely.
Absolutely. Generally, when it comes to the pit maneuvers, they generally try and attempt those pit maneuvers at about 35 miles an hour, maybe a little bit give or take. But definitely, as she powers through this residential neighborhood on surface streets, too fast for a pit maneuver, because you've got people walking up and down the sidewalks at this particular time of the day. You also have other vehicles that they could possibly rotate or spin this vehicle out and perhaps impact one of those other vehicles. And so definitely safety is an issue right now, and they're going to be very careful, take a lot of precaution as to when or how they do this pit maneuver.
All right, we have, thank you, Roland, very much. We're going to stay with your picture as we welcome former LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey on the phone right now with us. Cheryl, we have been here before. This looks awfully familiar, switching vehicles. What can you tell us about this?
Well, this person is driving really aggressive, and it seems like there's a sense of urgency on the part of the police that are chasing. I mean, we've seen something I've never personally seen, where I'm pursuing a vehicle and there's a standby vehicle for the driver to jump into as they flee from the initial vehicle that the officers were pursuing. And you can see that they're driving very fast. It looked like there were at least 3 people that jumped out of that initial car and entered this SUV, and they're very dangerous what's going on right now.
And how concerned are police? This is an attempted murder suspect that they believe that they are pursuing. What do they need to do differently when they're dealing with something that is this serious?
Well, obviously they want to be careful as they get closer to the vehicle that the person is not armed and doesn't fire on them. That would be my initial concern as I'm pursuing. But at the same time, you can see how quickly this car is driving and how little regard they have for the safety of those in the community. I mean, these are residential streets. A person, a pedestrian, a child could come out and be run over by this person. So there seems to be a sense of urgency about bringing this thing to an end, and I'm glad that there's an air unit overhead, because we know that they won't be able to outrun a helicopter for sure.
Absolutely. And just wanted to know, because you said it is so dangerous, will they be making a plan now of how to bring this to an end? Because even if this suspect vehicle stops at this point, fast, so we'll wait and see what they do. We've talked about a spike strip. We've talked about a pit maneuver, but speed's just a little bit too much. And also there is the concern about who's in the vehicle. Is it an innocent person, and could they possibly cause more damage if they do a pit maneuver? But we're just going to continue to watch this with you.
And one of the big concerns with the pit maneuver, the pursuit intervention technique, is that the idea of it, when it's executed exactly right, is that the pursuing police car, the first one closest up, nudges the bumper of the car they're pursuing, and it spins around, does a 180-degree turn, which in most modern cars causes the ignition to turn off. And then the police car that makes that maneuver and flips the car is supposed to continue past the person they're pursuing, or the car that's being pursued, and the next police car in line is supposed to go nose to nose with the car that's being pursued, right? Because it's spun around 180 degrees. Well, when the police are chasing somebody who is suspected in a violent crime or potentially armed, one of the things they're very concerned about is going face to face with them. When we see car chases end, a lot of times you'll see all of the law enforcement cars spread out behind, and then you have them on their bullhorns and trying to call the people out back up towards the police cars. A pit maneuver changes that dynamic a lot, because now the officers in that second patrol car might be face to face with somebody who is armed, and it puts them, in theory, at a potential disadvantage in trying to control the situation. So even if the speeds are right and the circumstances are right, when they're chasing somebody who's suspected of a violent crime, who might be armed, it may be a factor that they decide not to do that because of the position that it would put the police officers in, assuming the pit maneuver happened and it ended correctly with the officers face to face with whoever's in that car.
Absolutely, and we don't know how many people are in it, and we don't know how many people are armed, and we've seen chases before where the suspects are out the window firing at officers. So, I mean, it can get quite dangerous out there. So I totally get that they don't want to put themselves in a position where they're spinning a vehicle around, and now that vehicle is facing toward them. So, Eric, in your opinion now, the best thing or the most likely thing that they will continue to do is just to try to stay as close as they can behind the vehicle and then track them from the air as well?
That is obviously what we're seeing here. So that is possibility number one. In other car chases where there have been people suspected of violent crimes involved, possibly people who are armed involved, there have been situations where the LAPD has tried to use some of its armored trucks to box in the person that they are chasing. One of them happened not too far away from where they are right now along Alameda in South Los Angeles. The LAPD Metropolitan Division, which is where the SWAT team works, they have a bunch of armored trucks, not just those giant Bearcat ice cream truck looking armored vehicles, but they have a couple of other ones that look more like conventional SUVs that have armor in them. The reason they would use those is, first of all, because it protects the officers who are inside from gunfire, but secondly, they weigh an enormous amount. And if you put one of those vehicles on either side of somebody who's trying to flee, the engine in a SUV like the one we're watching here simply could not push one of them out of the way. And they use it like a roadblock that just is immovable. But that requires a lot of coordination. They've got to catch up to the person. And the only time I remember that happening in recent memory was when, and I may be wrong about this, but I believe there was a pursuit of a car where officers had actually observed gunfire coming from the car. And so there was just an extraordinary level of danger. But that's really an unusual situation. It's only happened a handful of times that I can remember. And you're right, there are some of these car chases where there's gunfire exchanged. A couple of those have happened recently. And of course, we saw the one in southeast Los Angeles some years back where the passenger in the car leaned out the window with a big handgun and was firing at sheriff's deputies. So these things do happen. It doesn't look like that's the kind of situation they're dealing with, but it's clear that there is an urgency. Otherwise, we would see the LAPD shift to a different tactic here.
Absolutely. All right, Eric, thank you so much. I want to bring Roland Spruill back in News Chopper 4. Roland, we're glad to have your picture back. We see that you've gotten around those restrictions from LAX airspace, and you're back on it. Can you tell us where we are right now?
Right now, we just made a right-hand turn from Imperial onto San Pedro right now, still weaving in and out of traffic in intersections and whatnot. We have not seen any close calls thus far. That's good news in terms of any impacts to or collisions to any other vehicles or anything. But then again, our view was obscured by buildings and, as I reported before, being held out by air traffic and LAPD. So right now, at about 25, 30 miles per hour, blowing through intersections and continuing on as this pursuit continues here. We have not seen any attempt of this individual, even though they have passed by the 105 and the 110, at least a couple of freeways. They've not made any attempt to get on the freeway at any time, which given in terms of safety, being on the freeway is just a whole lot better than being on these surface streets where now you have people, well, I know it's spring break right now, but perhaps some schools that might be in session still and kids beginning to get out of school for the day and that sort of thing. You also have people that are, going about their errands and so forth during the day, who may be out on the street and so forth. So still a very chaotic and dangerous pursuit as it continues here through South Los Angeles.
It really is. And we have seen this vehicle or the other vehicle too going the wrong way and not stopping for stop signs or street lights. But we're not seeing, how sometimes when the patrol cars are right up on them, it tends to make them go faster. We're not really seeing that. They're sort of staying within the same distance of each other and kind of keeping the same speeds. Have you noticed that?
I have, and I'm not quite sure if perhaps they got a message from the watch commander to back off a little bit and not be so aggressive, because we definitely saw some aggressiveness at one point from LAPD as they were making what it appeared to be an attempt at a pit maneuver at a relatively fast speed. But right now, this individual still going between 35, 40 miles per hour, which is a good thing, really, when you compare it to what we have seen, especially after that initial changeover from those vehicles when we saw here we go. When we saw her jump, that driver jump out of the one pickup truck and then jump into this vehicle, and with the how chaotic it was as they were speeding away from that scene on Century Boulevard. And so now it looks like they are on Broadway right now, making their way northbound on Broadway through the South LA area.
All right, as we continue to watch this, maybe it's a good time to bring in former LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, who, thank you, has been watching this with us and can lend some of her expertise as we continue now to now go past an hour. Cheryl, what do you think police are thinking right now? What do you do? Just continue to stay right behind this vehicle?
Yeah, they're going to continue on, and I would imagine by now they've had an opportunity to see the license plate, determine who that vehicle is registered to and where. Sometimes these suspects who are fleeing police want to get to an area that they're familiar with. They want to get someplace where they might jump out of the car and think that they're going to be able to elude officers on foot. And so I don't know if, obviously, the mindset of these people, but there are many people in that vehicle. And at some point, this thing is going to come to an end. It's Friday, and everybody can understand and appreciate what traffic is going to be like as they continue to drive and it gets later in the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does make me nervous they're staying on surface streets because, as Roland Spruill brought up, you have a lot of people out that can be out, and you think of families who could be out, people, pedestrians. I always worry about that when they stay on surface streets like this.
Surface streets, residential areas tend to make me think this might be something that they're familiar with. And a lot of times suspects think they can outrun police and get lost in a foot pursuit. And being that there are more than one in that vehicle, if they split up and go in 4 or 5 different directions, obviously at that point, the officers who are chasing in the vehicle are going to have to make a decision, who do we go after?
Right, and we have seen that before, too, but we've seen them do it effectively, too. Sometimes I am shocked at how quickly they can take everybody who has gotten out of the car and run. They can get them into custody pretty quickly, so we'll just have to see what happens in this situation. And I often wonder, too, when you have different people in the vehicle, maybe they're not even agreeing on what to do. We've seen people be, drop off someone here, drop off someone there. We just don't know what they're thinking at this point or what their mindset might be in this situation.
Well, as I was watching them exit that first vehicle that was being pursued, it looked to me like the people that exited the car seemed to be 3 females. That's what it looked like to me. And I kind of thought, before you said that the driver of this SUV was a male, I thought that based on what was going on, that these 3 females jumped in this car being driven by the male. And so they're in there talking, too. They're trying to formulate a strategy. Maybe some of those passengers that jumped into this SUV don't really want to be a part of this anymore. And so we have no idea, what kind of tactic, if you will, they're trying to deploy. But I imagine they're trying to come up with a plan to counter what's going on in this vehicle pursuit. And the longer this goes on, the more officers are going to engage and involve themselves. And so multiple suspects running in multiple directions becomes to be less of a concern as the pursuit goes on.
Yes, and often, too, when we've seen multiple people arrested, maybe not everyone was involved, but at certain scenes, police will take everyone into custody and figure out the details later because they just don't know who's who. So it just creates more to do in this situation. You're dealing with more people, and we really don't know the details of what's going on right now.
Right, and I just saw someone run up to a fence as they drove past what looked like it could have been a residential location. That seemed like maybe they were trying to get their attention and yelling something. They seemed very agitated. That was kind of odd to me as I was watching here on television. But again, my belief is that they're looking to get to an area that they're familiar with, maybe somewhere where they know someone, and maybe there's a concern that if we stop, the police are going to hurt us, and so they're trying to find a place to stop where there's family that might come out and intervene and assist in being taken into custody without being hurt by the police, if that's their mindset.
And we have seen that before, too, and family actually in contact with them. And, maybe they do drive home. They have certainly stayed in this area for this entire event and haven't really wandered elsewhere. So they could continue on surface streets in the area. So it does make you think that it fits the profile of maybe they know it or they are looking for a place to bail.
That's what I think. There's familiarity with this area. There may be folks who know them in this area, and this is comfortable. So they will continue to drive around and drive in circles, and we'll see them go down some of the same streets over and over.
Yeah, and does that offer somewhat comfort to police, too, who think, well, we'll just stay behind them and, you know, let them just feel a little bit more comfortable, and then maybe we can bring this to an end peacefully?
Well, you know, what would be going through my mind, and has when I've been involved in these vehicle pursuits, is that they're going to run. And so I would imagine these officers are preparing themselves mentally to get ready to get some exercise.
Yeah. Now, is everybody trained to do pursuits? I was wondering about that. Or is it just the luck of the draw? You get out there and you need to be trained to do a pit maneuver if you need, or to do, how does that work?
We're absolutely all trained on the LAPD what to do when we are engaged and involved in a vehicle pursuit. LAPD has driving training that they give to recruits in the academy, and I'm sure that it continues with in-service training. And so this is something that's very familiar. And then, of course, we get on-the-job training when somebody doesn't want to pull over. So, yeah, this is something that the officers are comfortable with, familiar with, have done many, many times before.
And I just think that adrenaline must get going, too. How do you control something like that when you realize I'm in this, I'm the lead car, or I'm the second car, I'm going to be in the middle of this when this thing comes to an end?
It's certainly adrenaline-packed when you first get involved in a vehicle pursuit. But the longer it goes on, the officers are going to settle into a rhythm and a routine as well. And the pursuit is not very fast at this particular point. And so I believe, based on my own personal experiences, is that they're calm and they're just going to react to whatever it is that the suspects in the vehicle do at this point, whenever that happens.
Yes, but as it continues to go on, do they look for relief? Do they switch out officers? Because after a while, I would imagine it's extremely tiring. Just that adrenaline, that thought, you were saying you've got to be ready to run, everything that's involved with it. Or do you have the lead car usually just, we're going to stay with it?
The primary pursuing vehicle will remain unless they have an issue with fuel consumption and they can't continue on. Then the secondary unit will take over, and that, will determine who then becomes the new primary pursuing vehicle. But the car that's been chasing this vehicle all this time will continue to do so unless and until a supervisor calls it off.
Yes, and we were talking to our investigative reporter, Eric Leonard. He was explaining how doing a pit maneuver right now might be dangerous, and because although the speeds are not too excessive right now, it kind of fits into the category, and the driver has been making turns, that you don't want that vehicle with a possible armed suspect facing you after they're spun around in a pit maneuver.
Well, that's always a concern, and although we don't know whether or not this person is armed, I'm hearing that this was involved in an attempted murder, perhaps. I don't know what that means. A gun, knife,
right.
hands. I don't know how they attempted to murder this person, but, we always assume that every suspect we deal with is armed, and that's what helps keep us as police and patrol officers safe.
So the pit maneuver would not be something they could do. What about a spike strip?
Well, I wouldn't say they couldn't do a pit maneuver, but certainly that would be a concern. A spike strip, if they continue to traverse the same streets over and over, a spike strip then becomes an option. So all of these things are options that are available to the patrol officers. But again, there's communication between these officers, on Simplex, where we can talk car to car for those who, the partner officer might be having negotiations with the backup units about what to do, as the driving officer is just singularly focused on staying safe and engaging this vehicle if and when the time comes. Okay, so here we go. Somebody just dropped something out of the car, it looked like.
Okay, good eyes. I did not see that, but it looks like something was dropped out. We were also showing on the other side of our screen that moment when they switched cars and we had the two people who got out and ran, or three people got out and ran. We, at this time, do not know from LAPD Media Relations whether or not they are in custody. But you saw something come out of the car.
It looked to me like something was dropped out of the driver's side of the vehicle, and something looked like a small, dark-colored object, kind of square. I don't know what that was, but that's what it looked like to me as I'm watching. And now they're going very slow, so this will be a great time for a pit maneuver. According to your graphics, they're only doing 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, they really are going slow. They've stayed at these speeds, and like I was saying, is they keep turning, they keep doing the same sort of maneuvers and staying at this speed. Yes, but I don't know if they're concerned about that. They haven't tried it in a while. They haven't tried it with this vehicle yet, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
And they may be getting information from whoever is helping to manage this vehicle pursuit, supervisor-wise, as to what to do, whether or not a pit maneuver is something that supervisors want them to deploy.
Right, and by this time they've had plenty of time to make a plan. We've been following this for a while now, and they really haven't changed their MO as far as what's happening since they traded vehicles and are now in this vehicle, continuing to go around the same area that they have been for the last about hour and a half as we've continued to follow this. And just the good point that you brought up, this all a attempted murder suspect is how it started. That's the pursuit right now. That's the want, as they say in this case, but we don't know any of the details about what type of attempted murder. If it happened now, is it the result of something that happened before and they were serving a warrant? We just know that this is a suspect that they are trying to take into custody, and then we have other people who are involved as well. So this is going to be a whole process, even when this does come to an end, of sorting out all those details. 2 scenes right now, and multiple cars, we should point out, that they rammed through and damaged.
Right, and so the officers are going to have to deal with, traffic collisions along the way. Those will also be additional criminal charges, hit and run, and I'm assuming no one was hurt in those traffic collisions, but you've got a hit and run misdemeanor every time they plowed into a car and didn't stop.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, I want to just point out right now that NBC4's Carolyn Johnson has joined me now on the set as we watch right now at 1:30. Carolyn.
Yeah, it's been such an unusual pursuit to watch this one unfold. And Kathy, you've mentioned numerous times this change of vehicles where we were watching that one vehicle that seemed like it was about to stop, the driver riding on the rim there. We did follow that group run into another car. At least one person did. But to be clear, it appears that initial driver from the first vehicle ended up in the rear of the second car here. So it appears there's a second driver who then picked up that initial driver. But it's been a bit unclear. Is it a female driver? Is it a male driver? And we keep going back to that original want. And this is that video we're talking about here on the right side of your screen, where you can see them approaching that car. Initially, we thought, is this car being carjacked? Are they involved? And it appears that perhaps this car responded and came to pick them up.
It was done very neatly, very nicely, and they took off. I mean, if you blinked, you missed it. They got out and ran, and then suddenly the next car took off. Police were right behind them, though, and that's really when it was the most aggressive at that point, because they took off at those speeds. But now we have been in this situation where just round and round on surface streets right now at speeds that aren't going much over 30 miles per hour at a certain point. That's why we keep bringing up this option of the pit maneuver, but they just aren't trying it at this point.
Yeah, it's been an interesting one, because earlier we saw in the initial vehicle, that vehicle ramming into other cars as it was driving really recklessly. The driver now seems a bit more in control, although, rolling through intersections and not always availing paying attention to traffic signals, as you can see, but the police are in close pursuit here. Yeah,
and it has seemed relatively careful. I mean, they are not obeying the traffic signals, but still going slow and taking a little bit of time as they go through those intersections. It certainly wasn't what seemed like the adrenaline rush right when they switched into the other vehicle. So, don't know if they're making a plan right now, if they're in contact with people. Cheryl Dorsey pointed out she saw someone yelling at them at some point. We've seen that in the past where they find a relative or something that comes out and they want to meet up with them. We don't have any indication of that at this point, but we're just really waiting to see what happens as the LAPD stays right behind them. And right now they're just going around traffic, making their way carefully around traffic, but nothing else.
And as we zoom in here, it does appear that perhaps the back left tire is blown out. There's some damage perhaps to that tire now. So I don't know if there might have been a spike strip involved along the way here.
Well, we didn't see it, but we should point out we were in LAX airspace, so a lot of the things, a lot of the time we missed that because we had to stay back per restrictions and the LAPD. So there are times when we did not have the vehicle in view, so it's quite possible. As we continue to watch this right now, the pursuit of an attempted murder suspect. No details on that, but we do know there have been multiple people involved in this. We're just going to continue to follow it as the LAPD continues to stay right behind at slow speeds and wait and see what they're going to do. We should point out, though, that they do have eyes from above, so this person is not going to get away. They are comfortable with staying overhead, too, so they will not lose this vehicle.
And I'm trying to see exactly where we are now. It seems we're still in the Westchester area, but it's a little difficult.
Yep.
Oh, we can bring in Roland Spruill, trying to get confirmation if Roland was with us. And Roland, where are you now?
Right now, we're going southbound on Vermont in the South Los Angeles area, and it's an interesting observation. I've seen at least 2 individuals standing on the sidewalk sort of cheering this individual on. So clearly, people are aware of this pursuit, that it's going around in circles through the South Los Angeles area. I did see this vehicle drive over something a couple of miles back that may have been a spike, but it's hard to know. It could have even been some remnants of a tire or something that individual went over. But right now, still southbound over. Look at this. People,
oh my goodness,
young kids walking through the intersection.
Yeah. That's what's so scary.
Have no idea.
Yeah.
Just plowing right on through that intersection and going about it like nothing ever happened. But as I was saying, still southbound on Vermont from 75th through the South Los Angeles area.
Well, that was so close, Roland. He was nudging through those cars, and I was holding my breath, but then the pedestrians right there. So I'm wondering if this is going to ramp up at all, because we're starting to see a lot more traffic, and now we're seeing that foot traffic, and this is definitely a more congested area. So it adds a new dimension to this pursuit.
And Kathy, it is Good Friday, so a lot of people getting off work early, getting out of school perhaps early. There are more people who are going to be out and about at this hour. And Roland, that was just terrifying, because not only did we have that vehicle blow through that intersection, but then the police were right behind, and luckily no one was injured there.
Yes, luckily nobody was injured, and your sense is that maybe these individuals don't purposely want to hit anybody or try to hurt anybody, but more times than not, that seems like that is what ends up happening as these pursuits continue on. And you spoke to the fact that this seems to be getting a little bit more erratic, possibly, as traffic is getting a little bit heavier, now making a right-hand turn on 83rd Street from Vermont, and that this pursuit was getting maybe a little bit more erratic and so forth. And I would agree with that, as they seem to be closing in with more traffic, more pedestrian traffic out in the street. This individual driving seems to be a little bit more chaotic in their driving now. Gutter running, driving down the side close to the curb between vehicles and that sort of thing, and like we just saw, plowing right through intersections regardless of individuals walking in the intersection.
Right, and here's a stop right now and going right through, and I'm just keeping an eye on the vehicle and the tires, because Carolyn mentioned that possibly there could be a situation with that. I was wondering on the turn, did they have a hard time turning there? So just keeping an eye on that just in case it is compromised in some way. It's kind of hard to tell as the driver makes their way around these vehicles that are stopped right now and going straight through this intersection. And back there on the right side of the road, we're just passing Normandy Avenue with police right behind, just right behind that vehicle, staying at the same speeds now, very, moderately slow, 30 to 50 miles per hour. So we're now on South Halldale, Carolyn, with this pursuit. 1:38 in the afternoon. It's been going on now more than an hour.
As we look at this now, this again would seem like this might be a good place to try to do a pit maneuver. Not too many cars in the area. Speeds maybe perhaps a little too slow for a pit, but at this point it appears the officers are just tracking behind. And we have been going through much of the same neighborhood time and time again. Now we're on South Harvard Boulevard in South LA. Let's bring in Eric Leonard. Eric, are you still with us up in the newsroom?
And we've just been trying to reach out to some of our contacts to try to piece together more of what led to all of this starting today. It's a little convoluted, so I don't have anything specific to add yet, but it sounds like this was either the result of an incident, meaning this attempted murder that the police have been telling us about happening this morning, or an operation to make an attempted murder arrest. I still don't have clarity on that. But as you were talking again earlier about the potential for a pit maneuver, also did hear back from somebody else at LAPD that said just whenever there's the prospect, not even confirmation, but just the prospect that someone may be armed, somebody wanted for a violent crime, they tend to lean away from doing it for the reasons we were discussing earlier, which is if it's successful and they flip the car around 180 degrees, that means that officers would then be face to face with somebody who could be armed. And also the police car at the front of that stack that does the actual pit maneuver would now be past the car that they were trying to stop and potentially be in a little more harm's way than usual. So
yeah, but maybe a spike strip at this point.
Right,
I think that maybe they deployed one.
Look at this.
Yeah, it's all kind of played by ear. For one thing, the spike strips require that there's some sense of which direction the person may be going, so they can get people in position. With all the people out on the street here, by the way, that we're seeing in the live picture on the left side of the screen, it almost feels like we've gone through this neighborhood before, but I think the street we're on now is different from the last few minutes. You
Looks
might have
like
a better
Van Ness
perspective than me.
Avenue right now and 83rd Street, but I saw the people there laying out on the sidewalk and people with phones out there. So I think you're right. You know, they've been through this area, or people definitely getting the word now that this is happening, and it's bringing out spectators for sure. We also have video, Eric, of a few minutes ago when the driver went right through an intersection, and there were people there. Not only was it a tight squeeze through the cars that could have been hit, but going through the intersection were people who were just out, and it was obvious from their demeanor they had no idea that this pursuit was happening. I don't know if we can get that video up in just a moment, but you could tell they were just walking and they had no idea this was happening. There was no urgency. It went right behind them as they crossed the street.
And Kathy, this is interesting. I mean, it seems like these vehicles in pursuit have narrowed the gap here. There's three of them now. They're all close behind this vehicle. And at this point, we're not really sure how many people are inside this SUV that's being pursued.
No, and we can't see in to get any idea at all because of those very, very dark windows. Are almost in a parade formation right now, just kind of following one after another at a relatively slow speed. Pretty content to just stay right behind the vehicle, and then more people coming out to watch because obviously they've probably gotten word now where they're hearing the lights or hearing the sirens and seeing the lights at this point as we continue right now on South Van Ness Avenue. Really has taken on the look of a parade. We see 1, 2, 3, 4 right now in our view. Patrol cars with lights, and the driver really not making any sort of move on this straightaway street, but now a few cars there to the side to go around, and we'll just have to see what they decide to do at this point.
Let's bring Roland Sproul back in. Roland, what's going on the opposite side of the street here? Is that an officer on motorcycle there?
I think what we have is a funeral procession on the other side is what we have. That's one of those funeral officers that direct traffic. And I've got to apologize for this shot right now. We're being held out by LAPD right now, so that's the reason for the long shot. But take a look as this subject approaches heavy traffic here. She is probably going to go opposing on the wrong side of the road here as we approach, it looks like Century. And let's see which way she turns.
Yeah, this is getting a little sticky here when you have the funeral procession there and then the police procession on the other side.
Yeah, kind of crazy, isn't it? And as we push in here and try and pick this back up again, she appears to be, he or she, I know we don't have any confirmation exactly of whether it's a male or female, but he or she is back on Century again, and from all indications, going anywhere between 30, 40 miles per hour or so. So not excessively fast by any stretch of the imagination, but again, with no clear plan that you can really tell of where she's going to go. Don't even know if she even knows where she's going at this particular point, but just casually driving on surface streets through South Los Angeles. We've seen, fortunately, few close events, or rather any incidents where she has almost hit any vehicles, but we certainly saw that one situation at the intersection where the kids were walking through the intersection. So by no stretch of the imagination are we not calling this a dangerous pursuit, because it is certainly still that.
Wow, look at that. Now we get a better perspective, Roland, and I'm counting at least 7 law enforcement vehicles behind that SUV right now as that driver makes its way down the center median.
7 vehicles and that airship overhead, right, Roland?
Yes, there are a couple of LAPD airships, we believe, overhead, and that is the reason why right now I have such a horrible picture and cannot catch up to you, because all of us are being held out. So we will try and track this as best as we can from a distance.
Okay, we understand.
As we are being held out.
Yeah, and makes our speedometer go crazy too. So you can't pay attention to that right now.
I'm very familiar with that area. Grew up over there, but this is LAPD's pursuit, and they're going to be primary for all intents and purposes.
Yes, Cheryl, we're now back live. This is a live image again of that vehicle being pursued. We see that driver in the median and blowing through a number of different intersections here. But again, the speed's not too high at this point, and we are now in the Torrance area as we again see this line of law enforcement vehicles in pursuit here of this driver.
Yeah, back live. And at this point, again, nothing really changing to change what the LAPD might do in this situation. Speed staying below 30, a little bit higher sometimes, but not a lot of traffic right now on this stretch of road. So again, they're content to stay behind, not as close as they were before, but a reasonable distance behind, and just to follow. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But as you said, now in the Torrance area, so a bit of a change of the location where they have been.
Circumstance that would require them to stop this pursuit or do anything different than just follow him and literally just see when this vehicle fails them.
Cheryl, we want to bring in Roland Spruill again. He's managed to get back overhead here. And Roland, we know you had some challenges trying to pick this pursuit up again.
Yes, it's definitely been one of those days, but we managed to pick this pursuit right now back up, now making a left-hand turn onto Del Amo Boulevard. We're in the Torrance area right now. Don't know quite yet whether or not Torrance Police Department is going to try and pick this back up and assist LAPD, but right now the subject's still going anywhere between 35, 40 miles per hour through the Torrance area. Again, we have not seen any close calls or anything for quite a few minutes. It seems to be a very casual, if you can call it that, sort of pursuit where they're just kind of casually following this individual on surface streets. And as I had pointed out before, there seems to be absolutely no attempt whatsoever to try and get on any of the freeways or anything. It has stayed on surface streets primarily, which perhaps portends to me that this individual might be just looking to get far enough away from the patrol vehicles behind he or she so that they can dump the vehicle and set out on foot.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Southwestern Avenue right now, still in Torrance, still at the same speed with the officers right behind them, and we're just waiting to see if they make any type of a move. Our thoughts starting to turn to how long are the tires going to last?
Yeah, because look at that tire there, Kathy. That rear tire also looks to be blown out, that right rear, doesn't it?
It really does.
Roland, have you noticed that? I mean, and actually the front one might be gone as well.
Yeah, and I have made several attempts to try and push in, but just when I try and push in long enough, he or she makes a turn. But
Yeah,
I'm looking at this passenger side tire, and I'm going to say it's probably intact right now.
Yeah, you're right.
Unless it's one of these, what they call run flat type tires, that once they get punctured, they from all indications appear to hold air and are able to sustain driving on the roads and whatnot. So right now, this driver continuing on, well, it looks like Western from 214th.
Yeah, the tires look bad, but I'm still looking at the vehicle to see if it's compromised in any way. Is it weaving? Does it seem like there's any loss of control? And I'm not seeing anything terribly serious, but those tires, yeah, they look bad.
Yeah, and I don't see any damage to the vehicle or anything like that. So that's good news, but because that tells us that that individual has not rammed any other vehicles or perhaps struck any other innocent civilian vehicles and whatnot. But still, she seems to have no clear or lucid plan as she continues on, well, it looks like southbound on Western at this particular time.
Yeah, now Harbor Gateway, Los Angeles. So again, just switching lanes or weaving in and out of lanes for no apparent reason. Now another left-hand turn. Again, onto a street with homes and people. We're seeing people coming out. We've seen pedestrians narrowly. They could have easily been hit so close in the intersections as the vehicle went by. Again, as you said, fairly controlled. Another turn, this time right onto Harvard Boulevard.
And we've been on Harvard Boulevard before.
Yep.
Back in the Harbor Gateway area here. And you do have to wonder, Cheryl Dorsey has mentioned this, that so often drivers will return to areas that they're familiar with and will circle in that area. And Kathy, as you've pointed out multiple times, this has all been on city streets. So we really have not been on the freeway with this one at all.
No, and it tends to make you really nervous when you're on these streets. As you said, people are out, right, Roland? The only thing we can say that's good about this is the speeds have not been excessive. But again, just weaving in and out of different lanes and making turns and not obeying traffic signals. And now looks like trying to make another turn as they slow down a little bit. Nope, going straight through the intersection with police right behind them. We're just waiting to see if anything is going to change here. Just holding our breaths to see if anything is going to be different here in this pursuit that has continued on now until we started at noon following this.
Well, and it was around 12:50 when there was a switch of vehicles, and we do have a crew on the ground right now that has a shot, and there you see it on the right side of your screen. This was the initial vehicle that was involved in the pursuit. We watched this vehicle pull over, the doors flew open, we saw two female passengers jump out and run. We saw the driver of this vehicle then open the door to that, as Cheryl Dorsey has referred to it, the second getaway car, jumping in the rear of that vehicle, and that's the SUV that police are currently following there on the left side of your screen. But it's interesting to look at this original vehicle, and I can't make out if there are visible license plates on it, but you got to wonder, have they run those plates? Do they have any indication of who might be involved in this? Have they run the plates of the, I know, sure, they've done all of this and maybe perhaps trying to draw a nexus here, there's some parallel between these vehicles and the occupants.
Yeah, and our photographer pushing in right there to show us, and by now, surely police have run those, and that is that truck that was the initial truck involved when we picked this up just after noon, the one that looked disabled and we thought was just limping to an end there and pulled over. We were expecting it to be, police to come out and bring this to an end, but no, that is when they made that switch and ended up in the other vehicle that we're now watching from Roland Spruill's shot from News Chopper 4 that continues right now on South Van Dien, now Vermont Avenue in West Carson area. So venturing out a little bit from the same area, but still staying, in the same neighborhoods there that they have been, which has led us and our experts to believe that maybe they're looking for a place they know.
Happening?
a familiar place or a place where they could possibly bail. And now it looks like police
Looks like
are
that's
running.
what's happened, yes.
Yes, it does. And they are on foot, Roland. It looks like police are running and in the street. And it looks like they're after those suspects right now.
Wow, that's a big response on foot there as these officers chase down the suspect that appears to be at the top of Kaywood Drive now. And this got to be a very sensitive situation for these officers. They don't know what they're getting into
No, and you
here.
see people there. There are people in the front lawn of the houses there. Police there as well, probably telling them, get out of here. This is not safe. It's not safe to be here.
I'm going to go.
I don't know. They're talking to someone there.
Yeah, the person at the
white,
rear of that
right?
vehicle looks like might have been someone.
Hands up. That could be the suspect now. They're definitely, maybe they don't know if that's the person they were chasing.
Well, we know there were more than one
Right.
right? There was at least a driver, and then we had seen someone with a dark-colored shirt as well. So hard to make out really who's who here.
Yeah,
or...
and that's the thing. They don't know. They have to proceed as if every person they're encountering.
We are getting a little bit more while we watch this, Kathy, and interrupt me, please. We can see guns drawn here at this point, but we are hearing from the LAPD Southeast Division that this all began at 99th and Avalon around 12:12 this afternoon. And that is something we've been over for some time now, going on almost 2 hours.
Oh, my goodness. And telling them now to be in the prone position, which they are obeying, and officers in to make the arrest. Many officers, we saw various vehicles following, and now those officers are out of their vehicles. They are making the arrest. So far, this situation seems to be under control. We'll see the all clear in just a minute, but looks like they have that suspect in custody. And that is definitely done, but they're looking, under the car.
Well, because we know there's more people
Yeah.
they've got to be looking for here. Roland Sproul, can we bring you back in? What are you hearing?
Yeah, this is a 22,000 block of Kaywood Drive. We're in the West Carson area here, and you saw as they kind of ducked behind that building before we could get over on the other side and foot bailed out. I was not able to tell how many individuals actually bailed from the vehicle, but they usually focus in on the driver, and from what I can see right now, this appears to be a male that they have in custody right now, walking away. So as you just were now reporting, there's got to be at least one or two other individuals that they're looking for right now. And as I pull out of the shot here a little bit, I'm trying to see if maybe a search is on, perhaps for other individuals, maybe to set up a perimeter. I don't see that right now, but for all intents and purposes, until we can establish whether or not they are in search of other individuals, a very dangerous and chaotic pursuit coming to an end here at Van Deen and Kaywood Drive in the Carson area.
Yeah,
and rolling those LAPD choppers overhead, they also have eyes on the situation and may be able to guide officers on the ground as to where perhaps someone else from that vehicle might have run to or toward.
Exactly, and I'm listening for any scanner traffic to indicate otherwise, but usually what they're trying to do at this point is to try and get patrol vehicles into place to establish a perimeter. They know that probably at least the driver ran in this area, but possibly passengers ran into this same area. So as I pull out of the shot here, we'll have to see as I duck down here where they abandoned that vehicle, where they bailed out. You can see several patrol vehicles still on the scene here. So we'll have to see whether or not they start setting up a perimeter to close off this entire neighborhood in search of other pursuit suspects.
Absolutely. Carolyn brings up a very important point, and that is that the chopper would be overhead. They could see how many people bailed out. We know at least one other person probably they are looking for right now, but all of the officers seem to go after, well, I think the driver in this case. They were running down the street after that driver, and they were able to take that person into custody. So maybe still one person outstanding. We'll have to wait and see if we see any
We can
activity.
certainly see, Kathy, they're directing traffic away from this intersection. Officers standing there and flagging people away. And you can see why, because
Mike,
just down the street, we've
on
got
the car.
multiple law enforcement vehicles stopped here, and that suspect vehicle in the middle of your screen. And that's where officers have pulled open all the doors and are searching that vehicle right now.
Yeah, they've got the doors open. They are looking inside, but at the same time, I know they're probably fanning out, looking for any other possible suspect and where they might have run. There are a lot of houses, a lot of places to go if they wanted to take off and disappear. Hopefully didn't end up in one of the homes, but we're not seeing any activity that would lead us to believe that they have located a second
We are
person.
getting a little bit of confirmation from our newsroom that the driver was taken into custody in the car. A passenger did jump out and run, so it was that